other municipalities to talk about the way that their governments are funded and saying, hey, is there something different that we can do here in the state of Michigan? Why did you decide to take on that task?
I think because probably unanimously everybody thought that the existing system is broken. And in Wayne County, when you fight to get out of, the financial distress, and then you're out of it and you're balancing your budget and you're still looking around, there's not enough money to perform some really significant functions. I mean, for us, it's assistant prosecutors. For us, it's infrastructure work. Different places may have nuances of more pressing issues, but I think unanimously they'll say there's not enough money, so there has to be a different process, reallocation, something. So we're just trying to go around and hear from everybody, try to build some consensus, and then as important, and Kathleen is a big part of this because data and the research and the experts, what is it we need to know about municipal finance? How did we get here? Let's really understand the structure of the problem, and now let's try to think our way into a better solution.
So what have people been telling you so far? Are they like, Warren, we can't believe that you're taking this on. Don't you have enough to do in Wayne County? Or are they starting to tell you some stories saying, hey, we could try X, Y, and Z?
I think they're all saying, basically at this point, yeah, we do need to understand this better, and we do need to brainstorm towards a solution, which I think is really positive. When you get to Mackinac, there's always the added agenda of, what are you doing it for? What's really behind the scenes? But the reality is, what's behind the scenes is, we have so many cities that are going into emergency managers and others, some poorly run, some just not with enough money to do the things that they need to do. And I'm not talking about the soft things, the things that we like to do. I just mean the core things that we really need to do to provide the level of service that people expect from us.
All right, so Kathleen, let's ask that question. How did we get here? How did we get to this point where our cities are struggling and they feel very underfunded?
Well, there's a couple of reasons. One is we're a state that's very dependent on property tax to fund local governments. And the Great Recession saw great losses in property values, which has impacted the amount of money local governments collect. And as we look at the statistics on taxable values, we know that Southeast Michigan and Wayne, Oakland, and Macomb counties had the largest drop in property values across the state, losing about a quarter of their values. So that's impacted the ability of local governments to provide services.
So is there any other playbook that Michigan can look into, that different cities can say, look around the Midwest and say, aha, places in Ohio are doing this better, or places in Illinois are doing this better?
Well, in many areas of the country, there's a broader range of taxes that local governments use to support services. There's local option income taxes and other local option taxes and fees that they utilize. Michigan doesn't allow local governments to do that, and that's something that we think is a part of the solution.
It's difficult, though, Warren, when you all of a sudden say income taxes or more tax. You find people are resistant to that as well, even though they still want to get the services. They feel that they've already paid enough, that maybe the money just isn't being used properly.
Well, and there have been numerous demonstrations that have supported that position, and I get that. But the reality is Michigan's 50th in the amount of money that comes back to communities. I mean, it's dropped over the years. You have states that have had significant increases. Michigan's about 5% less than you had before when, the cost of doing business is going up. So I get that we need to manage well. But I also get that when we do manage well and we don't have enough money to do the things we need to do, that's a problem. And that's what I'm seeing and hearing in many places.
So, Kathleen, sometimes people are resistant to change. There's no political will to maybe change the system that we have right now. What are you starting to hear?
Well, local governments, one of the things that they're concerned about is the state level of support for local governments and the requirement that the state should be sharing revenues with local governments and viewing local governments as a partner in delivering services.
Can you explain for us the revenue sharing that we have here in the state of Michigan?
Well, as a part of the taxing structure in Michigan, Michigan took away the ability of local governments to assess a lot of these miscellaneous taxes. In return, they agreed to share revenues with the state. And so what we've seen since the Great Recession is when the state was trying to fund their budget and deal with their budget challenges, what they did was reduce the amount of money that they shared with local governments. So local governments thinks that the state hasn't kept their promise in sharing these revenues.
How many more places are you going to go to, Warren, and kind of what's the end game of when you finally compile all this information and sort of the opinions of a lot of people from around the state of what we should be doing next?
Sit down with the folks that are actively involved, the communities, the organizations that are actively involved, and then try to craft some possible solutions that fit the kind of the roadmap of what we learn as we go throughout the state, and try to come up with something that's going to take bipartisan support for it to happen, and so we need to try to craft what we need to craft. I mean, one thing that you always have to remember is the dollars that we're talking about that the state has are our dollars that we sent there in the first place. What we're arguing about is how much of that we get back. And so that's kind of local communities versus state bureaucracy, and I don't know that anybody has enough money necessarily. I don't have a dog in that fight, but I certainly am very, very interested in understanding better how we allocate the money we have now. Are we allocating it the way it should be allocated? And if not, what do we do about that? And, obviously Kathleen has mentioned kind of how we're here. The property taxes are a big hit. I don't know if that's a part of the solution or not, because you got to get the whole state involved in saying, we think we can live with this.
Yeah, what would be the ideal end game here, Kathleen?
The ideal end
game, yeah.
Well, we've come up with a couple of recommendations. We don't think they fix the whole problem, but one of them is to look at Headley rollbacks. And right now, our property tax system only allows local governments to get more money when new buildings are constructed. And we think it needs to be able to reflect value increases as a result of renovations and a result of the areas becoming more attractive to people who want to own the property.
Okay. And speaking of trying to get more money for your county and for the place where you are, I just saw that the big sale of the wastewater plant in Wayne County. How is that going to change how things are run there?
Well, what it's going to do is give us some proceeds to allow us to pay into the underfunded retirement systems in a way. We had about a 41% funded retirement system. It's going to take influxes of cash to raise that percentage, which really needs to be raised significantly. So a lot of the profit, I don't know if you can call it profit, a lot of the sale price will go right into shoring up the retirement system, which is something that would take years to do if you didn't have some immediate influx of cash.
Last question for you. Are people asking you mostly about soccer stadium and the jail site up here?
Yeah, I think that's probably the most asked question. And really nothing has changed, really. The folks who are interested in developing it are off now trying to figure out what their real costs would be and what the real costs for us would be to fix the things that need to be fixed. What most people don't understand is they're not just trying to buy a jail site. They're also buying a courthouse and they're buying a juvenile detention facility, all of which have to be replaced. And so, saying it simply, finishing a jail is going to be far cheaper than building another jail, building another courthouse, and building another juvenile detention facility. The cost difference between those two is what Wayne County taxpayers can't afford to bear. So we need to identify what that cost is, and then they got to guarantee that they'll pay it.
All right, we'll be watching. All right, Wayne County Executive Warren Evans and Kathleen Lomako from SEMCOG. Thanks so much for joining me. I appreciate it.
Thanks.